I dare you to call me impatient. I've been through the test and I have survived. Now, what do I mean here? 45 minutes of commercials in the theater. Masala, papad, real estate, undergarments, Sensodyne. Bloody Sensodyne every time. And then a 3.5 hour movie. Just so I could get a 10-second glimpse at Avengers Doomsday. But that teaser is a discussion in itself. For now, I want to talk about Avatar Fire and Ash. Or, as my wife likes to call it, the blue egg. Because I've got thoughts. If the first one was about colonialism versus indigenous cultures, and the second was about inhumanity against nature, this one's a mix of both. But you've got elements of shamanism, you've got elements of a civil war between tribes, and. It is about how, when indigenous cultures, when tribals living in the back of beyond, suddenly get access to weapons of mass destruction, when they get access to weapons, how does it change things for them? Welcome to the Millennial Bard, because today we're going to be talking about the latest installment in the Avatar franchise. Now, the previous two installments in this franchise have been pretty spot on with the allegories. This one, however, felt like a bit too much. There was too much happening. Sitting at 3.5 hours, there are just too many things to keep track of, and as a result, it felt like nothing really got its due. I really feel that a movie of this scale could have benefited from restricting itself to 2.5 hours and just picking up on a few story threads that they really wanted to stick to be able to give their entire attention to those elements in the story, and to allow the audience to really go deeper into the stories that the director wants to tell. There are 5 moving pieces, and suddenly you feel you've forgotten about half of them. Now, let's talk about the characters and the performances. I have zero hang-ups in saying that Avatar is not really known for its character development. In the first one, Jake Sully was created like this messiah, this outsider who's had a change of heart. And you really saw how his character grew within that movie. But ever since that one, Jake Sully's been just a lost puppy who's constantly chasing his own tail and adding nothing to the story. And perhaps the only interesting thing about Jake Sully anymore in this story, in this franchise, is his dynamics with his son. But more on that later. The next character that I want to talk about is Zoe Saldana's character, Mrs. Sully. I just keep forgetting her indigenous name, and I'm so sorry about that, guys. But you know who I'm talking about. Now, all that Mrs. Sully got in the name of character development was within the first hour of the first Avatar. Ever since then, for that one particular character, it has just been about shooting arrows into cockpits and wailing all the time, which actually sounds more like a donkey braying. Then there's their weirdo daughter Kiri. Now, in Avatar Way of the Water, Kiri's character had this mystery around her. It had this mystique. She was able to do things that had no explanation. There was some connection to her mother, I don't even know how to put it. Like, is she her biological mother? Is she her thematic mother? I don't know. But about Kerry, she's been able to do things, and I was really intrigued. That was one of the most exciting bits for me in The Way of Water. And I was really hoping that in Fire and Ash we would get some resolution or some information about her origins and where her powers come from. What I ended up getting was something really vague. So vague, it made no sense. And I really don't believe that all that build up gave me the kind of payoff that I was really expecting. Now, the next character that I want to talk about is Colonel Quaritch. In the first movie, Quaritch looked so badass. You hated this guy's guts, but he still had that swagger about him that you absolutely could not miss. But after that first movie, since The Way of Water, and that theme continues here as well, this character's been getting progressively worse. He's been getting progressively more irritating. How do you even do that? Like, this is the one character in this franchise who's always been saying the exact same dialogue. I know what team I'm playing on. The third movie in, does he really know the team that he's playing on? I don't feel like that. I do not get that impression. Because he doesn't want to listen to the general. He doesn't want to listen to the corporate guy. He doesn't want to listen to his fellow Marine Jake Sully, who had a similar kind of transition from being a human to being a Pandorian. And then over here, he shows that he cares about his son, Spider, but then he is also constantly abducting him. It doesn't make sense. And to top it all, he's sleeping with the shaman. He's sleeping with the fire and ash lady. Uh, it's been 3 movies now, and when we reach the end of these movies, every single time I've been hoping that this character gets killed off finally. But he's like that grain of sand in your shoe at this stage. He wouldn't die, he wouldn't go away. He would still come in with, with this confused state of mind. So, from being the coolest character in this franchise, he's straight up gone to being the most confused, the most irritating, the most frustrating character. Now, I've talked about the characters that I didn't like or I just don't care about anymore. But now let's talk about the characters that I actually liked. The first one is Jake Sully's son, Loak. In The Way of Water and now in Fire and Ash, I feel like this is the only character that's had me emotionally and psychologically invested in his journey. As the middle child who always feels like he's never taken seriously, as the son of a legendary figure like Jake Sully, who always feels the need to overcompensate and always needs to prove his place within his tribe. I feel like his journey has been very interesting. He still is going through grief, he's still going through the guilt of losing his brother, but he's also got some beautiful moments of humanity, empathy, and kindness, especially with his whale friend. And if the fourth one comes, I'm not sure at this stage if I would even go to watch the fourth one, but if I do, rest assured it would be for this character specifically. Now, the next character that I want to talk about is the big bad in this movie. She's called Varang, and she's like the leader of the Fire and Ash tribe. She's a pyromaniac, she's a shaman, she's very unorthodox and very rebellious in her ways. Now, what I've really liked about this character is that unlike all the other characters that have been in this franchise, she's the only one who sounds menacing, who's got that conviction in her voice. She's got that psycho tone. She's got this way of delivering dialogues that is so evil and yet so seductive and so crazy at the same time. I really hope to see this character again because I feel like she's gonna be the one that can really make this universe interesting for me. Now, just in case you did not know, this character has been played by Una Chaplin. If the name sounds familiar and you're thinking, you're absolutely right. She is the legendary Charlie Chaplin's granddaughter. She is an absolute powerhouse. She is a talent for this generation. And I really hope that I get to see as much of her as possible, whether it's Marvel, it's DC, it's Game of Thrones, whatever universe, whatever franchise, whatever cinema there is. I want to see more of her. Now, the last character that I've really grown to appreciate from this movie is Spider. In The Way of Water, Spider was introduced as a remaining human baby who was just too young to be sent on a cryo ship. So he was kept back on Pandora. As an only kid, he bonded with the Pandoran kids, especially the kids of Jake Sully. He almost became like a cousin to them. In the second one, he was more of a baggage. He was getting abducted, he was helping Quaritch do all the evil things that he wanted to do. He was kind of like the glorified guide in Pandora. In this one, however, this guy has seen so much character development that so many of the other characters haven't had in 3 movies. Suddenly, in this movie, with whatever that went down, Spider becomes a symbol of how a white dude, of how someone from a superior race who is born and brought up in a different culture, in a different tradition, which may be considered inferior by the human race, but is not corrupted by society, is not corrupted by the politics, not corrupted by the capitalism, by the greed, could be loyal and could have a fresher perspective on how to look at things, and to not just be loyal to the race that he belongs to, but to be loyal to the race that has raised him. And I really feel with this movie, Spider is gonna become like one of the main dudes in the upcoming Avatar movies. Okay, now here's my biggest gripe with the Avatar franchise. They're 3 movies in and they still can't seem to figure it out. How is it that you've got these talent powerhouses like Zoe Saldana and Kate Winslet, and you fail to give them anything to do in these movies? Zoe Saldana, over the years, just look at her filmography. Just look at the range of films she's done. Just look at the range of characters that she's played. How is it possible that she is holed in this one character? How is it that she is confined to this one character that lacks any dimensions whatsoever? How is it that Kate Winslet, one of the biggest names in Hollywood cinema, one of the biggest names in British cinema, an Oscar-winning actor, gets nothing to do in this movie? Her character, her lines, her dialogues, her delivery have nothing whatsoever that sounds like a Kate Winslet. It has no bite to it. There's no crunch to her dialogues. All that she's got across these 2 movies is just pointless banter, just saying mean things to the outsiders, and that's about it. To put it this way, she doesn't even get a proper fight sequence within these 2 movies. So if you're someone working at Fox, if you're someone working at Disney, if you're someone working with the Avatar franchise, especially in the writing part, I beg you, when you're picking the best actors, when you're picking the best people in the trade, give them something to do. It will only add to an already glorious film. It will only add more substance to your movies. Alright, with that done, now let's talk about this. If I felt like the characters and the performance were a really weak component in this movie, in this franchise, this is the weakest one. And I'm talking about the script and the screenplay. The dialogues in this movie, they're made to sound very profound, very rich, very mysterious. There is a bit of mystique to the dialogues at times. There are moments where the dialogues feel culturally very deep, but when you strip it down to the bare threads, I think the dialogues really lack any substance. Like I mentioned about Kiri earlier in this video, for most of the dialogues, they don't really carry any substance. And especially if I have to take one example, Loak and Spider throughout this movie. And those are 2 of my favorite characters from this movie. Remember that. Whenever they talk, every sentence of theirs has to end with a bro or a cuz. And it gets to a point where it really starts irritating you and it starts getting a bit too much. And it seems like the writer's probably, a 70-year-old who thinks that that's how kids these days talk. Fine, we use bro and cuz sparingly, but not to this extent. To further add to that, I think a lot of dialogues that were supposed to carry that emotional weight, they didn't really land with me. I'm supposed to care about this character who's about to die. I'm supposed to care about the struggles of this one character who's really lost, who's really finding it challenging to find and pave his own path. I'm At no point in this movie was I able to really step into the shoes of those characters through their dialogues. Okay, so that was the script, but if I have to talk about the screenplay, the larger scheme of things, at 3 hours and 30 minutes, I felt like this movie tried to run before it could walk. Now, the norm across most movies is you try and cap those at 2 hours, 2.5 max, 3.5 hours if you've really got something to say, if you've really got something to show. On one hand, we've got movies like F1 and Superman, where so many of us were complaining that the movie felt really short, like the movie could have been longer by 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Directors are going to those lengths to keep their movies tight. Over here, I think we got these really long shots. And again, I understand James Cameron comes from a technical background. He comes from a photography background. He really wants to build a spectacle wherever he gets a chance. But does it then become a case of style over substance? Does it become a case of form over function? Does the director, does the filmmaker get so consumed in his art that he forgets what the purpose is, that he forgets what he's supposed to deliver? Now, when I say this, please remember that a lot of the glorious shots that we've gotten in this movie, this is not the first time that we've seen them. In fact, if I might be honest, a lot of the flight scenes, a lot of the scenes in the water, a lot of those whale scenes as well, they felt like those were scenes that were just recycled from the second one. A lot of those boat scenes, the fighter jet scenes, they felt recycled. Having seen The Way of Water, I wasn't excited about those anymore. They weren't getting me as excited. True, the novelty was there within the first 20, 30, 40 minutes of this movie while I was watching it in IMAX 3D. But I really feel the time that we got in seeing those beautiful visuals, I would say those were beautiful visuals. But did those beautiful visuals come at the expense of a streamlined, airtight screenplay? That is what I believe. Now, this is the one section that every James Cameron movie earns by itself. I'm talking about the technical aspects and the visuals. And if you've been following my channel for long enough, you might have heard me say this a lot of times, that I believe filmmakers usually come from either of the schools. They either come from the school of writing. They come with their background in writing these beautiful characters that feel really fleshed out. They come from writing stories that have a beginning, an ending, they have a conflict in the middle, and they pull you into their world of cinema just by the characters, the dialogues, the story that they build. Now, who would I put in this school? A Quentin Tarantino would fit in there. A Steven Spielberg fits in there. A James Gunn fits in there. Jon Favreau sits in there. You see, these are filmmakers, which I believe when they sit down to work on a movie, when they sit down to write a movie, to create these characters, that becomes their first priority. They are more focused on putting in the substance first and then deciding on how to add beauty to it, how to add those visual elements to really pump up their characters further. The second school where filmmakers come from, I think that place would be occupied by a Ridley Scott. It would have a Zack Snyder, it would have a Christopher Nolan, and definitely it would have a James Cameron. Now, these filmmakers, they are a school of visual storytelling. But remember, the first word is still visual. They will build these beautiful sets. They would go for practical effects wherever they can. These are innovators. These are the crazy ones, the ones who come up with ideas about how can we do this in a way that's never been done before. But these people, these filmmakers, they are susceptible to a pitfall. That a lot of times they would get so consumed by the artistic, the visual elements in their movies that the story, the screenplay kind of gets overlooked. But nevertheless, you could miss a Tarantino film or a James Gunn film in the theater, but you cannot miss a James Cameron film, a Ridley Scott film in the theater. Now, James Cameron has been a pioneer when it comes to CGI and VFX. Whether you talk about Alien, whether you talk about Terminator 2, whether you talk about Titanic. Now, this is a testament to this guy's technical prowess and how he's always been ahead of the curve. Avatar, a movie that released in 2009, the visual effects, the CGI, the animation, the motion capture, it has kept up with the times. Dare I say, a lot of the latest movies, even some of the movies that have come from Marvel or DC, feel inferior when you watch the first Avatar, because that is how amazing the visual effects are. Now, this movie would have been a lot harder to watch for me, at 3.5 hours, mind you, if the visuals weren't gripping for me. When I sat in the theater, this did not feel like a movie. This felt like a 3.5 hour long theme park ride. It felt like the kind of ride that I'd love to experience at a Warner Brothers or at Disneyland. And for that, there is no denying that James Cameron is the best in the business, especially with this component. Even here, I went to watch this movie in IMAX 3D. Now, IMAX 3D can be a hit and a miss in a lot of cases. I loved Superman. I loved how beautiful that movie was. But it did not land that well for me when I watched it in IMAX 3D. Over here, though, I would strongly recommend that if you decide to go and watch Avatar Fire and Ash, there is no other way to watch this movie than to watch it in IMAX 3D. It is a visual treat when you've put on your 3D glasses and when you've got these shots of the whales coming through. You see the waves on the sea. When you see the dragon-like creatures just zipping past. I would especially like to talk about that one scene where the Fire and Ash leader gets with Quaritch and she gives him like a hallucinogenic. Now that's like a minute and a half long sequence. Suddenly everything is psychedelic. You see the visuals get really hazy and like really wavy. I cannot remember the last time I saw a visual like that. Perhaps it might have been Spider-Man Far From Home, or it might have even been Spider-Man No Way Home, where his spidey sense is tingling. But this thing is dialed to the max. It was a really fun sequence. Now, another thing that I'd like to add here, and this has been pretty divisive when it comes to this movie. You might have heard a lot of people talking about the frame rate of this movie. Now you see what happens is that most of the movies, when they're shot in 24 FPS. That stands for those of you who don't know, that stands for frames per second. So a video is like a collection of photos. So 24 FPS means you've got 24 pictures within a second. This video that I'm shooting right now is at a 30 FPS. You've got video games, especially games like Call of Duty, that go up to 60 FPS because you don't want any drag when you're playing those multiplayer first person shooter games. But Hollywood, for the longest period of time, has stuck to 24 FPS. And you watch enough movies when you realize that, okay, 24 FPS is the industry standard. It is the cinema FPS, so to speak. Now, there are sequences, especially in the action sequences, in the underwater sequences, in the flight sequences, where the frame rate doubles. It goes to 48 FPS. People who've looked very closely at those things, they found it jarring. They felt like it ruined their experience. It was a distraction for them. They found it hard to switch from a 24 FPS to a 48 FPS. In my case, I did not find that to be a deterrent to my experience. I feel like those 48 FPS scenes, they really took me on a wild ride. They did feel very different at first. It took a bit of getting used to. But if anything, James Cameron has always shown us what the future of cinema could be. When he made Titanic, he showed us what the future of cinema is going to be. How spectacles like these would be practically possible for most filmmakers in the coming years. When he made the first Avatar, he actually showed the industry what the true applications of CGI and VFX and motion capture could be. So, him going to a 48 FPS is again Cameron pointing to the future and saying, guys, we need to double our FPS. And I personally am a big fan of this move for one more reason. I am not big on technology. I want technology that serves its purpose, makes my life easier, not more complicated. I don't want to get into technology where I'm gonna have to read through 6 different websites and watch like 2 hours of videos and talk to 10 different people just to get an understanding of what this really is. Cameron's reasoning for dialing up these scenes to 48 FPS was that he wanted to create a distinction between scenes of extreme activity, extreme motion, extreme movement, and the scenes that are more ordinary. The scenes where there's just people talking to each other. Scenes that are ordinary. For lack of a better word, scenes that are monotonous. Because when you get a very ordinary talking head scene in 24 FPS and then suddenly you move to a 48 FPS with dragons flying and sharks swimming through the sea and arrows whizzing past, it really dials the action up to another level. So if the technology has been used to serve a purpose, if the technology is being used to take the art a step further, I am all up for it. Alright, so now that I've given you the details on everything that I wanted to talk about in this movie, here are my final thoughts. Should you go and watch this movie in a theater? It's a more complicated answer than a simple yes or no. If you are someone who wants to have a visual experience, a sensory experience, definitely go to the theater. But if you're someone who's looking for a story, a character, a phenomena that really moves you at an ideological, at a philosophical level, you can skip it. But here's a kind of an issue with a movie like Avatar Fire and Ash. It may not be compelling enough to bring as many people to the theater as some of the other bigwigs. But when you watch this movie at home, you are kind of seeing only 40% of the true magnitude of this film. So the choice is yours. If you're someone who doesn't care too much about the story, you can switch off your brain and just enjoy the wild visual ride that this movie is. Go for it. But if you're someone who gets hooked on to things like a story, a plot, tight dialogues, you may need a bit more convincing. Also, as things stand, I think there's going to be 2 more Avatar movies after this one, and I'm really not sure how I feel about that. If this franchise is able to correct on the things that it's been missing out for the last 3 movies, I think that would be really promising. I would go to watch this movie first day again, like in the theaters first day. But if they don't improve on those aspects. If the reviews still come out that the story is kind of lean or it is a bit too consumed by its visuals rather than fleshing out its characters, I might even give it a skip. And what also needs to be factored in is that James Cameron is towards the latter end of his career. He's in great health, he's in peak shape. God bless him. But considering how intensive these movies are, how much effort they demand, how much money they demand just to be made and to be put out, I would still be very cautious if we're still gonna get two movies or if this gets wrapped up with the next movie and everything gets resolved. Alright, people, so those were my views on Avatar Fire and Ash. If you like this video, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up, share this video with your Sky people, and comment what you felt about this movie. And stay tuned because up next, there's gonna be two things. The first thing, I'm still waiting for all the Avengers Doomsday teasers to be out so I can talk about them at length. The second one, I am gonna be doing TMB's recap for 2025, where I talk about my favorite films from this year, the best comics that I've read, my most heard songs from this year, and lots of other stuff, including TMB's journey this year, as we started from 0 subscribers to where we're at today. So please stick around because I've only just begun. Until next time, this is the Millennial Bard signing off.